That's the last sound you hear if you're a 12-year-old and he pwns you on the internet. Today, we're back with Roundtable Part 2, yet again with Matt, Lindsey, and David Hodrick. What up, fellas?
What's up, man? Thank you for having us again.
Of course.
Welcome back.
Roundtable number 2, Mambo number 6.
My favorite Mambo. Well, this is, again, if y'all didn't catch the first round table that we did, basically, it's just us hanging out and doing our normal thing like we would do. We were doing these, Zoom and FaceTime things, and meetups in person long before all this COVID madness, and just talking about music and life and whatnot. And it was kind of the genesis of the show. And for each of these, we're going to pick a different theme and kind of just run with it for however long we see fit. So today, we've decided to talk about, which I think it's appropriate with the new year coming up, practice. That's a different round table.
Sorry. You sent me that email, and it was marked urgent, and I was wondering, how does this pertain to the round table later? But I shouldn't have brought it up.
Well, that's...
but you definitely have it.
That's going to be for the touring round table. I feel like that's a good area to stick that in as a subcategory. But today's all about practice, self-improvement in music. How do you go about that, and stuff we want to work on and change for this coming year?
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is our resolutions episode.
It's more or less. I mean, I'm not a fan of New Year's resolutions myself, because life kind of starts, from when you're born on.
Conception.
Yeah.
You always say that every episode, and I'm like, Max, make sure you edit that out.
You guys are going to have to cut me off from time to time, because I will just go on hour-long rants about this kind of stuff, man.
That's why me and Davey are the hosts.
That's why you're here, though, too.
Directing the circus.
Am I going to have to put in the SpongeBob 3 hours later?
You absolutely can.
It's the best.
And it really comes down to quantifying what you...
What was that Reggie Watts thing? That TED Talk? Comparary or non-comparary?
Oh, yeah.
In conclusion...
Ay, sheesh.
Well, I'll let either one of the two, actually I should say 3 drummers start this off. If Max, Matt, or David would like to talk about practicing and what that means to them to start us off.
4 drummers, right?
Wait, I forget. I always think of Davey as a guitar player and bass player. Do you play drums, Davey?
I play drums, but not like these guys play drums. I used to be good when I was 12.
Well, drums was your first instrument,
when
right?
I was 6, and I just kind of I'll hop on the kit once in a while, but I don't practice in earnest like I mean to. So I wouldn't count me on that for drums.
Do you practice?
I make it a point to not practice drums. What's that?
You don't practice in earnest, but you practice with earnest.
You know what I mean. I definitely practice with earnest. You know what I mean?
Sometimes at camp, sometimes to save Christmas, whatever the theme of the movie.
Dude, in prison, we practiced a lot more. You know what I'm saying? Every night.
I didn't even know Davey
Hard
played
practice.
drums. You sneaky bitch.
Wait, what? Really?
Did not know that.
Wow.
What's that?
That you play drums? I didn't know that.
Yeah. No, it was the first thing I was trying to do in earnest musically, because Dad did it and he was showing me rudiments. I was like, oh, this all makes sense. And then we moved out here, and I got my uncle's guitar and started playing it, and that was pretty much it. I was like, no, this is more interesting. I can watch TV while I do this. Because I think that's the one point I have about practice, is that practice shouldn't be too pedantic. And for somebody who's pedantic in the way they teach people and learn stuff. That's saying a lot. But I do think it's important. But
I just find
anyway,
practice
drummers.
interesting how everyone can practice a little bit differently. And, I mean, as long as the end result is exactly what you're going for, then, I mean,
Yeah.
fuck it. I mean, yeah, there's going to be, like, better ways to practice, but I don't know. I think the best kind of practice is the one that keeps you motivated, the one that keeps you inspired to want to come back to this again tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily like, oh, fuck, practice. Like, goddamn homework after school or something like that.
Right.
Because I fucking hate homework. I really
I
do.
used to love that after school homework though, G.
Oh boy, I can't wait to
home, I'd
get
be
home
like,
and do my homework.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, she gave me like an hour of trigonometry.
Especially,
Just-
especially if it's during summer break.
Oh,
Yes.
dude. Summer homework? Oh, dude.
Yeah.
That brings back memories, man.
That brings
Fuck
me back.
that.
I had to do a lot of summer school because my mom was like, "I don't trust you at home."
So,
It wasn't a
so
grade
Ain't
thing.
nothing stunts your joy of reading than being forced to read over the summer.
Ain't that right?
So you guys never had those periods in your life, like when the summer break rolled around or something, like you guys didn't get excited about having more practice time?
Well, I
that's an
started
interesting
playing at like 16, so I didn't really have that like I'm a kid and I play the drums kind of thing. Like by the time I started getting like into drumming, I was already, legally an adult. So I
Yeah.
never really had that like,
that's
oh
hot.
boy, it's summertime, so I get to practice more. Like, no, that was just the weekends for me. But I mean, I
Yeah.
played every day that I could really.
Yeah, I was 12 when I first started playing, and that was guitar. And then I picked up bass at like 14. And so, yeah, it was more like high school. Yeah, definitely was excited for that because I pretty much started playing bass the same time I started playing in a band. So it was pretty much, more practice time meant more band practice time mainly, or not having to worry about fitting it in, and could do it, more than just one, Saturday, a week. It was like, oh, we can practice during the week now. This is, exciting. And I guess the same with playing too, but I've always sort of not struggled, but that same place where David's coming from of like, trying to not view practice like homework. And that's really been like a mind shift that's happened, I'd say, in the last like 4 or 5 years for me.
Yeah, if I look at practice like homework, I would have stopped playing a long time ago. For me, I think about practice as every time I get on the kit, I just want to get a little bit better at something. Whatever it is that I'm working on, it's about just getting better at that thing and not. I feel like sometimes practice, the word has like a negative connotation that if you don't do it, there's going to be consequences.
Yeah.
So I don't think about it like there's going to be consequence to me working on something or not working on something that particular day. It's just making progress. That's all.
I
This is
think
more how I think about it.
practice has been self-care for me for a long time, more time than I could really fathom to grasp at this late date. Like David's saying, it's not born out of like, although the context of the word itself and the paradigm of practice, it puts you into this position of like, oh, now I'm under pressure because this is just below performance stage. It's like we're always simulating that. But the very act of doing, like, it took a long time before I could admit to myself that my, concrete goals of getting better were not why I actually picked up an instrument every given day. It was literally just because it calms my mind and redirects things so it might, prevent a mood swing from going like full force and like ruining my day in some way, in some measurable way. So that's really for me, practice is always going to be like, it's a safety net that I'm just like, you don't go without it, just like exercise and sleeping, right? It's like, it helps me stay on a almost even keel, which is clutch.
Dude, I can say, like, personally, I really identify with what you just said, man, because like the act of practicing, and I think one of the reasons why I've gotten so heavily invested into the world of practice and the study of practicing too is for those reasons as well. Like, practicing is literally the thing that, you know, got me through my parents' divorce as a kid, got me through, you know, pretty much every majorly, like, emotionally turbulent time in my life. And it's always that thing that I can fall back on. Maybe not fall back on, but it's the one thing in my life that really has had a very unceasing momentum forward.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always been the thing that has really propelled me through life and through any kind of emotional, you know, turbulence, trauma. Just having that outlet to get those emotions out. I mean, the drums are a really physical instrument, you know, but you can get aggression or anger or sadness out on anything, really.
Right.
But I think the thing that this conversation pivots on a lot is, at what point do you differentiate practicing with playing? And that's something that I talk with my students about quite a bit, is to learn to recognize when you actually are engaged in the act of practice and when you're really just playing and thinking that you're practicing.
Yeah, playing
So-
for the sake of maintaining, not necessarily for the sake of betterment.
Or just for the sake of having fun on the instrument. You know,
Oh, yeah,
some
yeah.
people equate practice and playing as being the same thing. And to me personally, I view them as two entirely separate things. And maybe that's a good place to take this conversation right now, is like, how do you guys differentiate practicing from playing? Because to me, playing is something I do after I practice. Because for me personally, if I start playing before I get any practicing done, that session is completely shot for me.
Interesting.
Like, I need to engage in things that I am not good at, and working on those things and strengthening my skill set. And to me, I kind of look at it as a, you know, how can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat? Kind of thing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
have any
Love
pudding.
that quote.
and-
Love it.
Yeah.
And so for me, you know, if I have dessert first, I'm not going to want to eat dinner. And that's
I'm the
that's
exact
very,
opposite.
very easy to fall into.
If I start with the fucking vegetables, it's going to make me think about all the things that I was working on and how much I don't like them while I'm in that fun playing mode. So it's, for me, it distracts me from the fun of playing, because I'm just going to sit there and think about, yeah, I'm doing all these things pretty okay right now, but what about 45 minutes ago when I was sucking at those things? So I have to start in reverse, honestly. And
Same.
the way that I think about it is like, I mean, I've been really huge on the Mike Johnston podcast, and like, I think this was like third episode in, they dropped like a huge quote bomb on me that's just like really sank in. And it was a teacher that Mike was talking about that once said to him, if you wish that nobody can hear what you're doing, you're practicing. If you wish that everyone heard what you were doing, you're playing.
Yep.
And that quote, like, it really sank into me to where I thought, like, oh shit, that is a really good fucking point, because there's so many times, like, yes, when you're practicing, that you go, wow, this fucking sucks.
Yep.
I would never in my life want to sit here and record this and put this on Instagram, because this is garbage. I fucking suck. That's practicing. And I personally, I like to combine them.
That's really funny that you bring Mike up specifically, because like a piece of like personal correspondence that I had with Mike is, I asked him that question actually. It was in regards to when you're working on something granted, this was when I was like 16. I asked him, how do you know when you're ready to move on from something? And now this answer might be a little unsatisfactory to me at this point, but at the time it was the thing I really needed to hear. So he used his book, which I was working on at the time, Linear Drumming, for any drummers out there who are familiar. What he told me is, if you're playing an exercise out of his book, or really anything, you could imagine that somebody is hiring you to play the example for the book. So to track on, the CD, the playing examples for the book. And he said, would you feel confident recording the playing example for these exercises? And if not, and if you wouldn't feel 100% comfortable and satisfied with the result, you need more work.
Right. Yeah,
He
he
just
brought
mentioned
that
that on like 2 podcasts ago or so, and I was like, fuck.
Yeah.
Right, because there's so many instances where I'm working on something, and if I were to ask myself that question, I would have to be like, fuck no. Like,
Yeah.
it still definitely needs like some work.
Yeah, well, and he takes that. He's talked about this on a couple different episodes, and basically he applies that to any concept. That it's not just like if you were taking a figure out of a book, but like say you wanted to learn a particular style and like you were really digging into that style. Picture that you're auditioning for insert band, band here, whoever that you're auditioning for. So if you want to get good at metal, picture like you're auditioning for a metal band that you really love, Metallica or something, and learn a few of those songs after you've dug into that style. Or if you wanted to learn, Latin music, then picture you're going to audition for an artist like that. Does your technique still hold up and your playing still hold up? Or, do you feel like you need more work? And that's a really good benchmark. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this theme today is me and David were literally just talking about this last night, in that I feel like with where I'm at now, I can't settle for like, any sort of C- or B+ playing that I would have been able to settle for when I was younger, about like, oh, that's good enough with whatever it is, a gig, takes, any of that. That it's just like, I don't know. I feel like the stakes are too high the older you get. I don't know if, anybody else feels the same way, but like the longer you do it, I just feel like the work that you put in with practicing and really honing your craft has to really be shown somewhere. You don't have to be the greatest musician in the world, but you still have to have, sort of a little piece of that in your own playing.
I don't know, for me, if I resonate more with the older you get. I think it's just more like the better you get, the less bullshit you put up with.
Yeah,
because as
that's
you
true.
get better as a player, you're not going to want to accept, putting out content that you feel like, with your better ears now, that you would go, yeah, that's kind of sloppy, but I'm ready to put that out. Like, no, if you know where you are as a player, then you know that you need to redo that take, that you need to redo, etc., and not just settle for, yeah, that is what it is.
Right.
I'd say it's probably, I don't know if it affects this for you guys, but at least somewhere in the back of my mind, there's that age thing that Jesse was talking about. But it's more this expectation from other people that oh, you're supposed to already be here in your career or your proficiency. And if you don't show that, it's kind of like, oh, he must not do this seriously.
Right.
Like he's not doing this professionally. Like if you're 18 or younger or something, and you're good, it's like, oh yeah, he's good. He or she's good. I can accept that some of their faults are going to get better because they're still growing. But like at this point, it's like, yeah, that's like
You should have this down by now.
Yeah, at this point, like your faults are more exaggerated.
That's I don't know. That's like life in a lot of ways too.
It's
where
any,
if
it's
you
any
look-
craft. Yeah, it's any
Yeah.
like, oh, you've been doing this for how long? Like, shouldn't you be better? Like, that's the reason why people get fired from contract work or, you know, things like, just like, you know, every other day jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. That is true. That happens. I think that your point is in there, and I think that it seems like it's a little bit individual when because that kind of stuff can get complicated. Because I'm hearing it differently too. I'm like, age is not a factor, but neither is other people's sensibility, even in a career aspect, even in the industry aspect, because the way I do what I do has always been predicated on, like, I'm not looking for approval. Like, I didn't need it when I started playing, and I don't need it from anybody now. I never got the approval I was actively seeking in all of the ways I was seeking it throughout my life. So how could I put that into my sensibility about music or even just relating to other people? It just doesn't happen for me. So my concern is always the one that's like, I guess it's more based in the age, like the long game. Like, how long do I have before this turns into like, oh, you definitely lost a step, homie. Arthritis, you can't keep improving. Like, the only thing that matters to me is that I can tell myself that I'm still improving to the end of I can play the idea I had more fluidly, or this will inform the next song I'm writing. Like, it's always going to come back to that sort of end for me. But
Right.
it's the end game, like when I'm gone.
Actually,
it has
no,
nothing
you
to do
guys
with anything else.
you guys are 100% right, because now that I think about it, when you see like a child playing, you know, decently
What child
well,
is this?
let's say they're 5 years old. You just see, you know, kid on YouTube, and he's playing a drum part or a guitar part, and for a kid, you're like, oh, that's pretty impressive that he's doing that.
Right.
But if that person were playing exactly like that at, say, 25 years old, you'd go, oh yeah, you don't have this gig. Like, you're nowhere near ready enough. But as a 5-year-old, it's like, oh, all right. So there is some like age pressure to that, you know, I didn't really think about.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with, like, when you're talking about the world of working musicians, there is a level that you're expected to, there is a minimum level that people subconsciously expect you to be at. If you're trying to operate within the world of other professionals, like there is a bar,
Yeah.
you know, and
absolutely.
that's not necessarily a bad thing, because to me it's actually really tragic, and this has happened a lot just as a teacher and talking to other people that, you know, I've met through gigs, where you meet somebody who has been playing for a long time, and you can tell that, you know, they never really had the right guidance, or they never really got their process together. And so, yeah, they've spent a lot of time on the instrument, but the way in which they've spent that time has yielded results that are, you know, somewhat lacking in terms of the return on investment. Because the fact is, that time that you invest on the instrument is going to pass, whether you spend it in a way that reflects high quality or low quality. That time passes regardless. And so for me personally, the thing that I've always cared about most, because the place I've always wanted to be is, I do want to shoot for being a world-class player. Like, I do want to pursue those higher heights, as it were. Whether or not that's, you know, is what is being actively reflected in my career or my playing, the thing that I care about is just knowing that I did what I could with what I had at that time, and I did it as best as I could.
And most efficiently.
So, yeah. So for me, that means, you know, not just putting in the time, but also studying the various fields that go into practice, like studying the neuroscience of practice and everything that goes along with that, the practice of practice, the study of practice, just to make sure that you're constantly refining your processing, constantly taking in new information that is optimizing the way in which you do things, so that you are essentially doing the absolute best that you can at any given moment with wherever you are in your progression. And I think for somebody who aspires to try to get to that kind of level, that's the level of dedication that you need to have. And
Right.
the relationship with practice, unfortunately, for people who are shooting for that level of a career, is that it really does become a very time consuming and almost selfish pursuit in that regard, because especially if you are a little older, say that you get started later on in your teens or 20s, that's an immense amount of time that you essentially need to make up for, because unfortunately the reality is that certain gigs in the industry are geared towards certain age groups.
Right.
And that's unfortunate, but it is an unfortunate reality. You do age out of things, but you also age into things. There are certain gigs and types of gigs that people don't necessarily want teenagers and young guys who are really green playing on. And likewise, there are things that are very image related, where the bar is not necessarily quite as high, and the look kind of supersedes the level of skill required for the gig. And that's equally unfortunate to me.
Yeah.
Not that I think that music should necessarily be a meritocracy, but I think there's a lot to be said for, just having the right person for the job, regardless of what their look or age or skin color or anything is.
Yeah.
When's the last time you saw like a skinny 14-year-old kid out there with like a bunch of 50-year-old guys on a blues gig?
I was that guy, but that was back when I did it. That was like
Surprisingly
5
often,
years ago.
actually.
Really?
Surprisingly
Yeah.
often.
I don't know if it's
I
happening.
don't see
still.
that.
I don't see it, but I don't go out much. I ain't got no life.
I'd say especially
It might be happening.
for blues gigs, especially if they're guitar players.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I
Well,
actually
it's-
see
Well, I just
young-
meant like a drummer specifically. Like guitarist, yeah, I could see that, but like a young, skinny 14-year-old drummer kid out there with like some 50-year-old guitarists. And
Well, I
whatnot.
mean, I think a lot of that has to do with where you happen to live within your country. Like where we all happen to live in, within the Antelope Valley area, you'll actually see that thing relatively often.
Yeah.
And I
Really?
think that has to do with, the fact that we have a population of less than 600,000 people. So there are lots of circles of guys who play in the Antelope Valley who are in their 40s and 50s and are not necessarily professional players, or more like weekend warrior types. And sometimes they're not necessarily super far along themselves. And they'll end up playing with significantly younger musicians just as a means of sourcing a musician.
Right.
Sometimes they literally have no other option.
Yeah. Well,
And I think a lot of us have had that experience out here, where we were the guys who were teenagers playing with a bunch of guys who were significantly older than us.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean,
This
Jesse,
reminds me of
yeah,
when I was in a
not really for
bluegrass
me.
band when I was 25 with a bunch of 70-year-olds.
Perfect example.
Nice.
And I was their MD and guitarist and
Yeah.
producer.
And
I've
you
only
could
been in like 2 settings where I was like the young person on there. That was like with Controlled Chaos, and I mean my time playing with like Mel Booker, but that was only with one member of that band being like over 20 years older than
Yeah.
I was. Everyone
So
else,
that's-
me and Amy, or Jesse and Amy, are all relatively the same age there.
Well, so yeah, that's a classic rock they're both like classic rock,
Classic.
blues, funk kind of vibes for both those bands for people listening. And yeah, I definitely put myself in that category too, because when I first started really getting into different styles of playing beyond just in my own band setting, it was, exactly that environment, going to jam nights. And those were super helpful because I was getting thrown songs that I had never played before. And then they would say this, but like swing it. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And I had no clue what that meant. I mean, I understood
You gotta
like
grab your bass and go like this.
throw it around, throw it around your head. Hopefully,
And
you
for
have
drummers, you got to do the Ringo hi-hat thing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The infinity ride.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I would break those two things into different categories. So, like, have I seen really young people playing with older bands like that on gigs? Sometimes, but not as often. If you go to like a jam open mic kind of where a bunch of people are getting up here and playing songs, yeah, there's usually like one or two kids in there. I mean, kids meaning anybody from like 12 to like 18, 20. Like kids, for older people, I would say. And I mean, I still get called a kid on gigs if I play with older people who are in their like 50s and 60s, just because I'm not even in my 30s yet. And so it's just, hey, he's the kid. It's like, all right, I mean, it's a
funny when you think you're old at 5 through 30, and then you play with somebody that's like 55, and they go, "Oh, you're just a baby," and you go,
yeah,
"What the
Sure.
fuck?"
right.
I get
Maybe
that.
I do taxes.
I get that now. And
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
it's like I'm in my 30s. I think I can safely say that I'm not old, but I'm not young anymore.
Right. It's
Right.
But I'll still get people who are working with people who are in their 60s or 70s, and it's like, "Oh, you're so young." It's like, fine, whatever.
whatever. Yeah. No, I get that too. And I mean, it's kind of a compliment, especially if they compliment you on like if you're playing together and they like what you do and they go, "Oh, you're so young," because they probably are thinking back to when they were that age, and
So
You
that
know,
Close to
that
what you
kind
were
of
doing at the time.
that kind of
Yeah.
brings something that I wanted to ask, like regarding practice and all the work that you would put into your instrument. Like, what do you think is a validation of that? Because I feel like being musicians, it's very hard to get validation. Because if you're doing a good job, no one's gonna say anything.
Yeah.
I don't know, not for
I
what
got
I've
my answer,
experienced
but-
personally. Well, go for it, Davey.
I am my own validation.
There you go. That's a simple ass answer.
I play to hear myself play. That's why I do it the way that I do it. That's why I practice it, to make it better than the time before. That's about it.
I mean, I think everybody needs to have that, but it doesn't hurt to, I guess like getting the gig is a type of validation. I feel like most, from peers, it's hard.
It's not something I think that you can. I mean, it's not. I don't want to make it a philosophical episode, but I'm like, how do you transmit those sorts of things from one person to the next?
Right.
We're all so self-contained.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's interesting because, like, if you build a house and someone goes and lives in that house, they're going to say, "Oh, this is a nice-ass house. I enjoy living in this house all the time." Right? If you play a gig, I mean, depending on the instrument, I guess, too, like, I think singers get praised more than anything. But, like, I'm usually invisible. And I know we've talked about this before, but there have been times where I've gotten off a gig and someone would be like, "I didn't even know you were playing. You're you're in this band? Oh, I didn't even know that."
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, dude. I mean, I can totally identify with that. It's interesting though, because for me personally, I kind of have a very opposite experience to that where that's actually something that I really thrive off of and is really validating about the way that I do things in particular, because like especially when I was younger, I have a very, you know, analytical approach to a lot of things.
Yeah.
I get very, very granular about things, and I'm very particular about how I spend my time in that effort of trying to pursue those greater heights, and even acting selfishly in the pursuit of that. You know, I didn't go out a lot as a kid. I spent most of my days practicing all day, every day. And the sense of validation that I finally got from that is when it started reflecting in my social life, where being a musician now all of a sudden, well, at one point it was the thing that all of a sudden made me visible as a person, because, you know, I was a quiet, brainy, kind of awkward kid, and
Nerd.
being a musician, yeah, totally. And I still am. But being a musician was the thing that generated interest for other people in me.
Right.
And, you know, I'm vain enough that when that happened, I was like, I kind of like this. Like, people are paying attention to me. Wow,
Yeah, for
girls are hanging out with me now. Whoa, I have a girlfriend for the first time. Whoa, I am talking to more than one girl for the first time. Whoa, I'm talking to like 5 girls for the first time. And, you know, that's incredibly shallow in some ways, but, you know, as a young man, you know, we're mostly, you know, dumb and shallow at that time. So it was incredibly validating at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, people taking that for what it is. But for me, to go from someone who was essentially, you know, ridiculed and invisible by any other means to all of a sudden now I'm towards the end of my, you know, high school tenure, and I'm hanging out with popular kids. I'm going to parties. I'm playing for people's parties, and
Yeah.
Matt
I'm
plays
playing
drums.
I'm playing gigs on the weekend, and I'm making money when no one else is really making money. And if they are, they're, you know, they're working at a McDonald's or something, which there's nothing wrong with that. But to be at that point in high school was really, really cool for me and very like socially empowering.
Yeah.
And so that kind of bled over into my playing career as well, where because I've tried to stay so adamant about keeping that momentum and constantly progressing and constantly refining the things specifically that I'm working on that are going to have that high return on investment. So as a drummer, your time, how solid you are, how tight you play with yourself, your touch, your taste, the choices that you make. Those are all things that when you work on, they have a very high return on investment because they're the things that people notice. And I think a lot of the things that drummers in particular tend to get really wrapped up on are things that are either musically not very useful or are actually sort of annoying to other musicians. So
Like what kind of stuff?
just like the worst problem being overplaying. You know, like guys will work on vocabulary that just straight up doesn't work for the styles of music that they're working on, and they don't really play with context because maybe they don't have the playing experience to understand how to use those things properly. And you know, if you're really honed in on one style of music, that's very easy to do and to think, oh, everything I play can work in every style of music.
Right.
And I can just play everything super loud and fast, and people are always going to respond positively. And
Yeah.
that couldn't be any further from the truth. So to me, the most
I think
unfortunate
a lot of that
thing
comes from shedding too much with yourself and not like playing
Yeah.
out with others. Because when you're just playing by
Yeah.
yourself, you can throw on as many notes as you want to, and the song is right there, and it just sounds cool as fuck. but you don't have that experience of being up there with a bassist going, could you knock that the fuck off, please?
Right.
Right.
You don't
Right.
have that.
And as a musician, that's a huge part of your process, you know, the things that you work on. If you're not using your time wisely and you're working on the wrong things, unfortunately, those are things that are probably going to make themselves known to you, whether it's someone straight up telling you or you losing the gig and having no idea why, which to me, that's the most tragic thing that can happen to any musician.
To not know
is to be fired from a gig and just be left hanging with that idea of why.
Right.
And if that person is really self-aware and introspective, maybe they may figure that out.
Right.
And it could be the thing that turns that around for them. But there are also a lot of people who are not that introspective, and some that are even narcissistic, where they just dig their heels in even harder because
They
of
just
that
don't
negative
understand.
experience. Right. So anyway,
They just don't get it.
to wrap that all around, to me personally, I feel that if you're really doing things right and you have a good process and you're working on the things that really do make a big difference in how people hear you, and especially your bandmates and how they feel you, they will make that known. Like if you're making big strides and progress from gig to gig, people will say something, because eventually that progress will stack up to the point that people will kind of just give you that face like, woo, you've been working, you've been practicing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, you sound great.
Well, I guess you could say like there's maybe two forms of validation then. I definitely understand like the social, and that's like a long-term oh my God, what's the word? Validation. That's like a long-term goal of practice and being a musician and getting it. And then there's like the short-term immediate things. And I think the long-term is definitely harder to see for most people, I would say.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about like the plateaus that musicians reach. And for me, it's only been recently that I've reached a plateau that I've noticed myself overcome in my playing and like practicing. I don't necessarily practice like most musicians practice, but but for a long time, it's just kind of been like, you know.
Well, Max, how do you think most musicians practice? Not to derail your point, but that I'm curious about.
Yeah, we should all have an idea of what this bass line is.
So I don't necessarily practice. My practice involves, I've always been, in anything I do, I've always been like a learn by doing type of person. So that means like, you know, if we're talking about the summertime, I get to practice more. Now that just means I get to, you know, play in a band with my friends more, something like that. And I take that as practice. And the way it's practiced to me is that the way my brain works is that I'm going over gigs or things that I've done in the past, or new melodies or new rhythms, just constantly going in my head like all the time. So that's me kind of like cementing core practice techniques without doing them necessarily. And I know that may sound like a cop-out for actually physically practicing, but it's worked. I find it hard to practice without having a tangible goal, like a reason to practice. So if I don't have a gig coming up, or I'm not writing for something specific, then I kind of just don't do it.
Yeah.
Jesse, you wanna back him up on that one?
Oh yeah, no, I have a few things. As far as its validation into what we're talking about now, like pretty much with me, and it's funny, like hearing everybody's different points of view on this. Like I'm coming from more of the Matt side of things, where like music was always something where I wanted, it was something I used as like my identity to separate myself from everybody else and what everybody else was doing. And so that like that's my unique thing of like, this is what I do. And pretty much from the time that I started playing to about March, April, when all of this quarantine stuff started, that was like my motivation for playing. I mean, there's the actual I love it, and like when you write a new song in the practice space, or you finally like finish a project and put it out there, there's like you get that adrenaline rush too before anybody's even said anything about it. So, or you play a gig and it like goes really well, regardless of whatever happens in the audience. Like I get a buzz off of that for sure, and that's a huge motivator in it. But along with that, there's been this consistent factor of, if I do this to my full potential, this is something that kind of gives me, I don't know, a purpose for being here on the planet. So my practice has really been tied into that, to where I would say from when I started to when I finished college, or like kind of middle of college, I would say I was really grinding on getting better for the sake of getting better. And then, and like whatever it was, timing, anything theory related, melody, things like that. But then there hit a point where like my practice shifted from actually grinding to get better to like trying to keep up with playing and all the different things I was doing. So, because I was usually from college to up until recent years, I was doing like 2 or 3 bands at one time. So, and like one would always be actively gigging. And so whether it was like cover band, or I'm doing stuff with like school ensemble stuff, when I was doing that kind of stuff with Matt, and whatever it is, started working and doing, tech stuff within music. So it hit a point, I want to say about 2013, 14, where I was like practicing to keep up with the gig and not practicing to like get better. And then I broke out of that, I'd say in the last 2 or 3 years, and I was like really grinding on like playing to get better again. And then it's been sort of an uphill process from there, because I felt like, oh damn, like I was really good at playing this set, and then I kind of like lost focus on like all of these things that I was working on.
Yeah.
And so this whole time has thrown me through a loop, because it kind of like for a good chunk of months just kind of I had no purpose or motivation to play, because the reason why I play is to entertain people, and that's the way I look at it. And not like I want to change what I do, because I don't play styles of music or play a certain way to like appease people, or I think this is what people like. I want to be myself, put that on display, hopefully people like it. So really this whole time has been getting out of my previous mindset and trying to shift into a new, more productive mindset on like why I do this to begin with. Which really, like, the reason why I do this is, to feel good. And it goes back to, it's kind of a mix of what everybody's been talking about. Like, when I first started playing, like, with a band and with other people, it was like, this is really fun. And this is, like, one of the things I love doing. And it's kind of been getting back to that through all of this, and just not getting so caught up in, you have to practice so you can get better, so you can do the thing. So the thing, like if you're in a band, the band will do well, and then you will do well. You are building your career basically. So if you don't practice, you won't have a career, and you'll be fucking homeless. And like that's the anxious thought that goes in the back of my head, instead of like practicing for,
But it's
hey,
fear-based.
Well, yeah, it's like, and the reason why I was neglecting practice too during all of this is because Dave Chappelle said something really key that I felt applied to a lot of things that I was relating to. And it was on the Joe Rogan podcast he just did, where he kind of dropped in for like an hour. He was saying this whole time for COVID, people are left sitting with their choices and being able to reflect on their choices. So like, you know, somebody, do you like the relationship you're in? Do you like the house that you're in? You know, do you like your life, basically? And I really didn't like, and I'm already a self-conscious person anyway, but like looking at my playing, I wasn't ashamed of like, oh, I didn't put any work into it. No, I put work into it, but I felt like something that you had mentioned, Matt, like I felt like my return on investment for my time in general and time I put it on the instrument, it's like, oh man, I could have been way more focused, you know, just, I mean, put in more time in general, but it was a lot of that. And so whenever I would sit down to play, I would just be really hyper self-conscious about all the little things I didn't like about it. And I just, I would play, but I felt no motivation to actually work on getting better because I just, it gave me an excuse not to think about that. So this has been like a real awakening of like, oh, like I need to shift my entire mindset into how I get better and how I play. And
it's all perspective, man. And
100%.
I should curtail what I said before with yes, those were, you know, means of validation for me, but a lot of those things didn't become apparent until well after they had happened.
Sure.
Because I think the only reason that really worked for me is because those things were not my motivation for getting better. And I think, you know, if the social aspect and the girls and things like that had been the motivating factor for getting better, I would have crashed and burned very soon after graduating high school. Because as we all know, the older you get, the more your social circle tends to get tighter, right? So you're not in a situation where you're around 400-500 other people every day. Or for some people, you know, it's literally thousands of other people that you're around every day in high school or elementary school for that matter. It's that for me, playing music was really the only thing that gave me any sense of meaning or momentum in my life. And everything else that came of that, the attention, the growth of my social circle, those were all things that happened as fringe benefits of that, and were really not motivating factors at the time. It's the pursuit of that bigger thing, and I think what it comes from is people recognize when someone is aspiring to greater heights than the average person, whether that's in painting or playing music or business. Like, dude, think of how many people there are, especially now, like kids that are in high school that have, you know, serious entrepreneurial gigs because of the advent of the internet being what it is now. Like, dude, there are people who are still in high school that are making 6 and 7 figures online, and that's absolutely mind-blowing. But it's a thing, and you better believe those kids are getting some kind of, you know, social validation from that, and hopefully they're not feeding off of it in the wrong way. So if anything, I look back on that and I think, wow, you know, that was really cool that things played out that way. And at the same time, it makes me think, wow, has music really been the only thing that's really made me interesting to other people in my life? And
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, yeah.
Not to me.
I was gonna say no. You got way more under there than just.
Like,
but I think most musicians can identify with that because it's the thing you're passionate about in your life and the thing you invest the most time in. It's almost impossible that you can completely divorce your sense of, you know, self-worth or self-satisfaction from that.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't take pride in your work and the progress you've made as a player, you wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So
it's it's interesting.
Right.
It's interesting. Like, it definitely depends on how you grew up and where you grew up. I think a lot because
sure,
you know, I went to a private school, a small private school growing up. And even though I was doing music the whole time, and there wasn't that much competition really. Even though I felt I was good and like deserved some things, I would get picked over for certain things, even from like my friends. Like, dude, I play in a band with you. Why didn't you ask me to play drums with you on this thing that you're doing? Type of thing. Why'd you pick this person who's younger than me? And I don't know. I think this would be cool to like for everyone to like share maybe a specific validation story that they can think of. I have two quick ones. Like the first time I think I felt validated as a musician was when I was working at a summer camp at my high school. I had already graduated. It was like a music summer camp for kids. Yeah, that's a good description, sure. And there was my mentor at the time, who was the head of the jazz department for my high school, called me for a gig that they needed a substitute drummer on this like private jazz gig, because their drummer like got sick or something and couldn't make it. Like it was last minute, and he was like, and he called me and was like, "Hey, can you do this?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, absolutely." It's like the first time he's asked me to do something for him or sub on a gig that was like paying. So like that felt really good. And then the other one was just recently, actually.
Good.
Which is funny because like up until now, I felt good as a musician, but being a keyboardist, I'm probably the most invisible person on stage.
Unless you're Lewis.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Because
I mean, that's going to come down to how you're playing, though. Because I mean, when Lewis is playing keys, like he's eating a stage.
Yeah, but
I'm saying,
but I'm playing cover band gigs where most of the songs we play aren't keyboard specific already, and then we're playing with backing tracks and shit. So I could be doing this, and no one would know the difference. Is what I'm saying.
Right. I know what you're saying.
If you ever played like that on a gig, I would probably look over at you and either laugh or be slightly concerned. Like, is Max okay?
Except for the musicians on stage with me, maybe.
Yeah,
but even then,
okay.
even then, sometimes. But I wanted to preface it with like, so I don't sound like a complete schmuck with my practicing. I do have my hands in a lot of different musical aspects. So, drums, keyboards, but, I'm a composer and a sound engineer, mixing engineer, recording studio guy.
He does stuff.
So I think I've talked about it on the last round table. We have a VR company that I'm involved with, and we just put out our Christmas spectacular, which I was involved in doing all the audio mixing for. And a lot of the music tracks were recorded here, and I mixed. And Oculus bought or licensed 6 of the episodes. And within the chain email of the back and forth between our representative, who is like helping us with the Oculus contract and everything, there's a thing that says like, oh, Oculus wants these specific episodes because they have more music in them, and they liked the music. They really liked the music bits more than the other, like the play and the improv. Not that they were bad, but they thought that like the music bits sounded better and they fit it with the Christmas thing. And I was like, oh.
You added the spice.
Aside from everything else I've done as an mix engineer, this has been my first like real validation. Like, oh, a giant company like Facebook, Oculus, actually liked what I did.
No, that's fucking solid.
Yeah.
That's fucking
Yeah,
solid.
I
right
think
there.
you're. I think you're on good standing about feeling good about that.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
shit.
You know, not to brag.
Sips.
With
Sips
your fancy
assholey.
water. With your fancy sparkling water.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely a brag, but I wanted to make it known
No,
that,
that's
that it's
fucking
like
dope.
that, like,
Yeah.
for how long I've been doing this, this is like one of the first times that I've actually felt validated in this career.
That wasn't just from like a buddy going like, dude, man, you sounding great. And you're like, all right, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that your friend's validation means less. There's validation, then there's like more validation. All gigs
Just
are important. Just
different types
some
of
gigs are
validation.
more
Yeah.
important.
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, those are the two different. That's like an
Mm-hmm.
immediate validation, and that other gig was kind of like a long term that led up to that
Right.
validation.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a couple, but if anybody wants to share theirs, let them go first.
I've definitely got a few too.
Good man.
Well, let's hear yours, Matt.
Let's hear from Davey. I haven't heard from Davey in a
Yeah,
little bit.
yeah. Let's hear from Davey first.
Okay.
You don't have to share.
Here's my validation. So you guys know about Disaster Cabinet. Me and Max, we finished an EP a couple months ago.
Sick.
And one of the songs, it's not really a song, it's like a spoken word. It's the last song. And it used to be about all of my substance abuse and mental health stuff and just things I messed up with people. And it was a long, long poem. And then I rewrote it once my mom died. And that's the version we did. And it's my validation.
I fucking take that too.
Making your own validation.
Totally.
Guys, you got to understand something like, there is no other. I can't fathom any other type of validation than the one I'm going to generate. That's not to take away from anything that Max is talking about, and I mean, we do work in the industry, but I don't work in the industry to create the art that I create. I create the art that I create incidentally. And it's most especially for me. So I really, that's just, not that I'm trying to be contrary. It's just like the validation thing. It's just like, that's the only validation I can seek that I do seek.
No,
Totally.
I totally get that. For
I don't
you,
think-
that's what's the most important.
Yeah, I don't think it's contrary. I think that's super valid. I mean, if you can make me feel something about that song as someone who doesn't really pay attention to lyrics, then I think that's
It says a lot.
I think that
And
could be a
that's about
validation
as
of
close to a goal as I do have, really. It's like, oh, a little something out of you too. That's wonderful. That's good.
I think there's
Yeah.
I think most artists who release original music can agree that a lot of their validation comes from just not only just putting out their work into the atmosphere, because it gives you a sense of like completion. Like, I've done this, and this is who I am, and now listen to it, like. And then for someone else to listen to it and resonate with it is a super strong form of that.
Right.
That's cool. The one thing I guess I would add real quick is that I guess I operate. I consider myself pretty empathic. I feel like I know what people who care about me project as to what I really do, because I keep my shit kind of in the shadows because it takes me a long time to conceive and then create these things. But I guess I'm I know that whatever's going to come out, like when the stuff comes out, people are going to be like, dude, that's like, it's like fucking bizarre. Like, that's, is that you? What is that? And I'm just like, it's exactly as bizarre as the me I always present to you every day, which you guys know is pungent. So I just, to me, it's like, that's going to be another part of it that I have to scratch my head and be like, how is this not exactly what you expected from me? But that's probably that disconnect between what people's expectations were and what I present them is a pretty significant validation when I do experience it, which is weird.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I love making people go like, what the fuck? What? Why? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Right?
I think
Keeping
you're
them on their toes.
conjuring some Frank Zappa
Right,
with
no,
those
you know.
vibes,
Yeah.
Yeah, everything
Well,
in
that-
turgid flux.
But it makes
Well,
sense
that's
to
why-
who you are, Davey.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I feel
think-
like me and you click musically, Davey, because I have that with the bands I like. There's a certain sense of that I don't always get to put out there. And so whenever we play together, I get to let a little bit more of that out. And then, like, it's okay to do that because there is something about, with me and the different art that I like. I love a song that is, an introspective ballad that can make you cry, but I also love a band and a song that can make you kind of like take a couple steps back and be a little bit like, oh, okay, like that's intense, like whatever it is. And yeah, I think it speaks to, if you're creating something that's that intense, whatever it is, I feel like you're already kind of generating your own validation anyway, usually, because if you're coming from it from sort of a left of center perspective, then you're already like not necessarily seeking the approval of other people, really. You're just trying to master yourself and putting it out there.
It's not what they want, like the industry, and,
Right.
and I mean, all my broad thing is that like it's a sensibility. Simply, it's that they have the right to deserve and consume whatever it is that they want to, but they don't have the right to want that specific mindless generic thing from me. You can get that anywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
unless
You
you're
know, and so and it's a connection that will it just like all the necessary connections, the ones that will be made will be made.
unless your goal is to make money, unless that's like your first goal in creating original music specifically, like
Sure.
to make money,
Which it
then
could be.
it could
But
be.
I
Yep.
mean, that is the weirdest way to go about trying to make some money real quick. Like, I got a plan.
I mean, there is an
what are we
industry.
going to do? Day
Music.
trading? No, we're going to write original songs.
I mean, there is an industry for that. I know a few people who like that's what they do for
True.
a living is they go into
Yeah,
studios
same.
with producers
Yeah.
and sing demo tracks that they're going to then shop to
Yep.
artists. But
For real.
Yeah.
but if that's not your goal, then I can't imagine any other musician who's writing original music like for anyone else to really dictate their music.
Yeah.
If that
And-
makes sense. Whatever.
Oh, I think I do. Yeah. The difference between what people are doing and their subconscious, what's really driving them, and what they're overtly presenting is also a whole nother subject on that note, I think.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
that the reality is that people can produce something not wanting a specific set of approval, but when they get it, they react a certain way, which means that maybe it was on their, myself included, just because there's we're all fallible and we're all trying to make sense of the continuum.
There's a certain level of expectation that's just in the back of your mind all the time, and it's a different level for anyone of like what you put out into the world. I guess is might be
Yeah.
what you're
Right.
what might be what you're saying, like, and that dictates like how free you are with with what you put out.
Yeah. Well, and that's
fair.
yeah, that's always why. That's always why the band path has been more attractive to me than trying to, I don't know, play. I don't want to just sum it up as playing someone else's music, which I wouldn't mind doing that, but I I think that like while I'm here, I'd rather try to put something out there that I identify with. And yeah, I want to make a living being a creative person, but I want to do it on my own terms. And all of my heroes did that, even if they weren't, you know, dripping in money or fame. It's like they had an audience that sustained them with, for what they did. And in a non-musical way, like somebody I really admire is Don Hertzfeldt, the artist, because if you watch any of those cartoons, it's like they are not fucking mainstream at all. They're like, you watch that and you're like, what the fuck is that? But he, creates his work, he puts it out there, his fan base supports it, and, he's just is doing what he's doing. And that's all I've ever wanted, really. It's never been about being the most successful person or like having some pipe dream. It's like, no, I just want people to enjoy what I do and, put it out there like I want it and then find people who connect with it. So it's I guess it's kind of where Davey's coming from, because I don't want to alter what I'm doing, but I just want to find people that are into it and then, see if those people like it. It's like toothpaste, it's like you advertise that. You want people to try the product, it's like I want people to listen to it. If they like it, cool. I don't want to force anybody to like,
You want them to
That's
like
a
it with,
deep
with
cut,
consent.
dude. Toothpaste.
Yeah,
A
that's
lot of
like,
people don't know this, like the history of toothpaste and how they made it popular. That's really funny. If you bring that up.
I'm just saying, man.
What you got, DH?
Yeah. Who made you valid?
Fucking. Honestly, there's a few, but if I narrow it down, this one, well, I'd say these two because they just happened in the same weekend. Last year, Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, getting to play with, Jerry Cantrell, Mike Inez, the guys of Stone Temple Pilots. Actually, like being able to play with those guys, and they've done Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp before. They know what it's like to get up there, and players are going to be at, varying levels, but you don't really get up there as a rock and roll star and expect some random dude to just hop on a kit and actually make you go, oh shit. And to have each of those bands, for Jerry Cantrell to like come back and give that band look over to Mike Inez when I started playing, that moment right there, that wasn't just like a, oh, all right, drummer, but an actual like that musician look, between him, between the basis of Stone Temple Pilots telling me that I really had the original drummer's like greasy feel down.
Yeah. I remember that.
That proved that I'm actually like listening to the track and actually feeling what's going on and not just playing the notes. And when it came to the actual performance at the Whiskey, we got done playing, and there was Doogie, obviously, that was a big one, who was about to leave the night altogether, saw me play, and then just decided to stay and get drunk because he was just in such a good mood.
For reference, that is my boss for the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camps, or the technical person, worked in the business for years and been a roadie to a bunch of different people, and
so he knows fucking players,
Yeah,
and that means a lot. And the cherry on top of that weekend was after we played, some random guy had told me after everybody had done playing, camp counselors, like professional rock star drummers were up there doing their thing along with, campers and everything. And this guy went, I just got to say, man, you were the only drummer tonight that actually made me feel something. Thank you. Like that to me, just that spoke a lot. And I wasn't really feeling a lot of self-doubt going into that weekend necessarily, but there was a lot of, just at the time, fuzziness about whether my sound is solid. Like, it's not like one of those sounds that you hear and you go like, Oh yeah, you've got one of those sounds. Like my sound, I can identify as myself. Like it's just me. I hear myself playing, and it's just that's David playing.
So
And when you,
so does that mean that it's not going to hurt as bad when I tell you you suck?
yeah, because I hear that, and it's like, well, that's me then, because I don't have anyone else to compare that to. But when you're
Right.
developing your own sound, it's equally liberating and terrifying, because it's awesome when you don't sound like anyone else, but it's also terrifying when, because you don't sound like anyone else, you don't have that that place of comparison to hear your greats and like the considered like greats of the instrument and go, okay, that's what they sound like, and I don't sound anything like that. Shit, where do I fall on that spectrum of like, am I good or am I just kind of shitty? Am I just like okay at what I do, or is this something to where people go, no, there's something about that.
Yeah,
And
there's potential
find
here.
that's a really hard like journey. But after that weekend, just as one example, it let me go like, okay, I wasn't immediately a better drummer over those 4 days, but my mind shifted into, I don't have to worry about it. I just
Yep.
need to become a better me. All the things that I need to work on that I hear in my playing and I go like, I don't like that, isn't a reflection of like, oh, you need to catch up to be in the camp of better players. It's no, now those are just fundamental things, micro timing, feel, touch, that I'm just going to refine and become a better version of myself, and not because I'm trying to play catch up with anyone else in the field, because I've got my own fucking thing going on. And that's not to say that, well, I've got my own thing, so I don't really need to practice. I just got my own thing. Like, no, I've got my own thing, but it can always be so much better. You know? And that's what motivates me to keep practicing, because of my own actual curiosity as a person. I go, how much better can I get? And if I don't practice, I won't know. Where will I be in 5 years? I have to keep practicing so that in 5 years from now, I go, oh, this is where I am now. Cool. But what about 5 years from now? That's what keeps me going. I just want to know, how much better can I get?
Sure.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point and all that. And I think it's a little healthier to look at it that way instead of like worrying about where you're at with everything, you know?
Mm-hmm. If people like you, people like you. They're going to hire
Yeah.
you back. They're going to spread your word and say, hey, Matt Lindsey's a great guy. He's a great player. He'll get it all down. And then you get that phone call from somebody that you've never met in your life based on a recommendation from some dude that you played with like 4 or 5 months ago.
Right.
Like, that's fucking dope, to where you don't have to like
Yeah.
worry about that kind of shit.
That's a very validating thing. And I feel really fortunate to say that, especially in the last 6 years or so, almost every bit of work that I've done, well, I guess it's been more than 6 years at this point, but almost every bit of work that I've done in the last 6 years has been based on recommendations. And
You set the groundwork.
yeah, I mean, when I think about the things that, I've done where I've felt a sense of, gratification or achievement, there's so many, but I'm also coming from a different mindset. And that mindset is not compatible with a lot of musicians, where, I mean, it's something that I've kind of gotten a lot of judgy vibes from a lot of people over the years, because my ambition as a musician was never necessarily to, have my own album or play in a band or to like quote unquote make it with a band, or as my own player. And honestly, the purest ambition for me in practicing and wanting to be a musician is because the act of playing music is wholly gratifying in itself to me. And so my outlook has always been that what I want as a person, first and foremost, is to make a living from playing music. And the capacity in which I do that is actually secondary to me. And the thing that I care about first and foremost is that I can support myself doing what I love to do. And it just so happens to be that there's an infinite number of ways to do that. And I find every single one of them gratifying, whether it's playing live or playing in a studio or even teaching, spending my time with a 5-year-old and getting them, started for their first time, and trying to do what I can to make sure that that kid has the best shot that's within my ability to facilitate to pursue the instrument and not quit. Because as a teacher, I feel like that is my prime initiative as a teacher is to make sure that I am not the reason, first and foremost, that a child quits their instrument. And 2, that they'll see it through to the point that they do get a sense of encouragement and fulfillment out of the instrument. So for me, just the act of being a working player in any capacity is gratifying in that way. So, I mean, for me, the thing that most immediately sticks out, it was getting the scholarship to go to music school, and not just a scholarship, but to score like the highest scholarship within the department that I could have. That was incredibly gratifying. And I also know that if I had come in at any other time than when I had, whether it was a quarter earlier than when I did or a quarter after, that would not have happened. Because there were guys in the classes beneath and above me who were frightening players. And the people in my class were great players too. So for all I know, it actually had nothing to do with my playing merit, because they judged it on, a multitude of things, like your grades, and there was an essay you had to write, and there was correspondence that had to be done. But that was incredibly gratifying. And just being able to do that coming from a place where I was fully convinced that that was an opportunity that was completely out of the question for me, because frankly, my family has never had the money to afford something like that. And, it still costs money, but it was a dream that I was able to realize. And it has really led to an incredible amount of opportunities after the fact. So because I went to school, I also got on my first tour. And while the tour was insanely gratifying, and not only was it my first tour, but it was a double bill. So I was playing with 2 artists, which was insane. But I think the sense of gratification that I got out of that most was the fact that one of the guys that I went to school with that I admired the most, the person who I personally thought the most of as a drummer, was the guy who recommended me for the gig.
Oh, wow.
And
wow.
that was flooring to me. And I'm not going to have any kind of grandiose idea about it and think, oh, well, I must have been the first person he thought of. Because for all I know, I could have been the 10th person to get the call. Or,
Sure.
Who would have been willing to do the gig for the money.
But shit, you got the call
the fact
anyway.
that somebody I respected that much reached out to me personally about it was even more validating to me than the gig itself. And honestly, it's hazy at this point, but I think another teacher at the school who I also really respected actually kind of encouraged that decision, if I'm remembering correctly. And that kind of changed the trajectory of my life at that point. That led to so many opportunities. I've played with so many people because of that gig, and it opened a lot of doors, because the fact is, when you do things like that, people start to see you in a different light. People, because there's just this weird thing about, it is that meritocracy side of being a musician, which is kind of unfortunate.
It's that legitness.
It's the more things you've done with, visibility, or what people perceive to be as credulity. It puts you in a light where people look upon you more favorably, and maybe somebody will call you for something over someone who they were considering, but maybe doesn't quite have that. And maybe they call you instead. To the same degree, you could be a drummer who sings.
Yeah.
And if you're a drummer who plays your ass off just as well as the other guy, and you sing, you're pretty much going to get the gig every single time. And that's a personal weakness of mine, but getting my first tour was a big one, for sure.
Yeah. There were a lot of gigs that were available that I couldn't get because I didn't also play guitar as well as keys.
I mean, that is, I want to say it's bullshit, but like, I get it. Like, so many of these bands, they want that multi-instrumentalist just because, I mean, it saves money more than anything.
Right.
Like, why be a 5-piece band when you could be a 4-piece because you got members that can swap off instruments and shit? Like, that's making everybody more money.
Well, looking at it from my perspective, like, I don't play multiple instruments efficiently enough to put it down on a resume, but I can crew. And so that's the thing. Like, I'll be like, hey, you don't have to hire crew people because I'll fucking sound check everything, set up the back line, and then, and then we'll be good. I'll be sort of either quasi tour manager, or I'll tech for the whole band, and I can play. So, there's my multifaceted thing of, like, you're still saving money if you hire me, which is weird to think about it in those terms, but, like, that's part of the business of it, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
But again, it's all, I look at all of that as, like, your craft, and it's, like, the whole package that you present yourself as. So it's all skill sets that you work on and build up.
I just play the drums.
That's fine.
That's
I mean, one
playing
other
the drums
thing,
and being a decent person.
one other thing that
Usually.
I can say that was a big motivator for me, especially because it happened at a time in my life where I did feel like I was losing gas significantly. I'd never stopped practicing and working towards that, but a lot of the work I was doing as a musician was not as gratifying as I would have liked it to have been. So something that was a previous goal of mine was just to work, every night, and to work as much as possible. And you got to be careful what you wish for, because eventually that happened for me. And unfortunately, it was a situation where I wasn't always enjoying what I was doing. And I was kind of slipping into a bad place. And I talked to all of you guys at the time that was going on. But the thing that really snapped me out of that was actually doing my first international gig. That was like
that was the thing that drew you back in.
That was incredibly motivating. Going out and playing in the Middle East and doing a USO show and everything that came with that, and particularly who I got to do that gig with. Someone who's became a very, very close friend of mine who I still keep in contact with. And that was pretty cool. And I've ridden off of the high of that for a while.
Well, you still are. To a degree.
You're still high.
Yeah.
That's still high.
You look high as fuck.
Yeah. And sometimes if you forget about things like that happen, or at least not forget, but you lose focus, or you get caught up in the moment of things that might be happening, you can think back on moments like that, and it's like renewed fuel again, you know, and it just
To get
aligns
back
you.
there.
Oh yeah, and I have a few moments like that too. Mine, I mean, I don't want to cut you off, Matt. I don't want to, if you had more to your point there. Mine, just because you had brought up the first time you had felt it, Max, and I'll have my most validating, which is pretty recent, like a year ago. The first one was those same bar gigs that I was doing and jamming, and you know, hey, we're gonna do fucking Dear Mr. Fantasy and swing it, and it's like, what does that mean? I don't know who's Mr. Fantasy, like shit like that. And I had done those, and I had kind of eaten shit at all of the jams that I had done when I was like 18 or 19, like just fucking, you know. I sounded like you just took a fish out of water and handed a fucking Fender bass over to it. And it's like, here, just play it. And it's like, I can't even breathe right now.
Fucking jam out, son.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm, you know, way too stressed to do that. And, or, you know, occasionally you'd get somebody who I want to have on this podcast, Mark Burgess, who's a local musician, but has done a ton of gigs and toured and traveled, you know, all over the place. And he was up at the same bar where all the jam nights would happen one night, and he asked me to play Sissy Strut by the Meters, and I had never heard the song before because I was in long hair metal world at the time, so I couldn't get the accents right. I didn't know where to play. I never heard it, and so he's trying to show me on the spot, like playing it and like doing the hey, do this. Wasn't getting it.
Jesse,
So-
hold on. Did it sound as bad as when I tried to play Sissy Strut with you for that test flight audition?
Yeah, probably.
Stiff, stale, don't know
Yeah,
what the
yeah,
fuck I was
absolutely.
doing. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fucking god awful. So I had taken a break from doing the jams, and I literally spent probably 2 or 3 months just playing blues, like different radio stations, and like basically playing the stuff that I would get thrown there and just really digging into that style. I came back and the guys they were like, oh, hey, yeah, I remember you. What's up? You know, just kind of like, oh, yeah, you look familiar kind of thing. And I get up there and I play with like one of the main groups that like the collection of guys that always played there. And I was like getting all the hits and live band stuff that they were throwing out and was like locking in with them like I had played with them for a while. And at one point, like the guitarist takes the solo and the singer turns around, looks at me and he goes, what the fuck is your name? And like I had met him already, but I was playing so well to where he was like, you know, hey, I want to talk to you afterwards. And he wanted to like have me play bass with them and come to the jams more and stuff. So like, I had given myself enough time to where I went away, honed my chops, and came back, and they had forgotten that they had already met me. So that was the first time I felt validated. Second time was not second time, but the most validating I've ever felt. Last year in November, I was working the rock and roll fantasy camp, which I've talked about on here before. And this headliner was Cheap Trick. So it was, you know, all the members of Cheap Trick kind of alternating and, you know, playing the songs of Sgt. Pepper, which they were doing their residency in Vegas doing that. And so it was them doing Sgt. Pepper with a whole nother group of camper musicians and a small little string ensemble at the Whiskey on the floor. And Vinny Appice is one of the counselors for that, and I was already working with him through Last in Line and had gotten to know him, and he's drummed in like Dio and Black Sabbath and, you know, all sorts of stuff. And his bass player didn't show up, and I don't know why, like just basically didn't show up to the camp. So he comes into our tech office and goes, hey, you play bass, right? And I said, yeah, and he just gives me the wave like, come here. And then I ended up filling in that afternoon, like, you know, on bass for whatever songs they were doing. And it was Beatles stuff. So it was pretty easy to just jump in, and I had heard the songs before. And so I'm playing, you know, they already have a drummer, but he's like kind of overseeing the band. I start playing with the guys, and he's looking at me and nodding like, yeah, you got it. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. Cut to, you know, they need a bass player for the whole weekend. So in between teching and working, I'm jumping in and just playing for like 10 minutes at a time and filling in doing 3 songs. So, and then there would be other counselors and other people walking in over the weekend hearing us rehearsing. When I would be in there, like Tony Franklin's another one, and Derek St. Holmes is there too. And they would walk in, they'd be like looking at me going, oh, because like they had seen me like just working. They didn't know I played at all, or I might have talked about it, but they had never heard me. And cut to the last show we did at the Whiskey, where we're playing with Cheap Trick and up on stage and everything. All of these people that had seen me, as a tech and just the guy that sets up the gear is now seeing me like in my element, is seeing me like smile and like having a good time. And like when I'm in work mode, I'm very serious face and all that. And like when I'm playing, it's a whole different vibe. And more than like I got getting to like play a song with Cheap Trick, which was cool. Like that was awesome. But it was these people that I had worked with had gotten to see me for what I do. And they liked it. They were like, hey, you sound really good. And at the end of it, Vinny came up to me and was like, hey, you sounded great. Like, that was awesome. And meant it. It wasn't just like saying it to like blow smoke up my ass or anything. He meant it. And he was one of those guys that like I had listened to his music since I was a teenager and seen him play when I was, a teenager. And just for him to say that, at that moment, like, it just totally blew me away. And it just, more than the moment of like geeking out inside, like my 14-year-old self going like, oh my god, that was cool. Like, it was this thing of like, I felt like I got welcomed into the professional world, like, because they were like, hey, you sound great. And if I sound great, that means that like I could be in the same caliber of musician that they are, of all those groups of people. And so that was a moment to where, like, after that, it sounds weird to say, but I started to take my playing more seriously because I took it seriously. Like, oh, it's not just like, my hometown that can hear my playing. It's like anybody can hear my playing. My playing has the potential to be heard by anybody. So why wouldn't you want to make it as good and as great as it could possibly be? Whereas before, if you had hit 89%, if that was your grade on like whatever songs that you put out, we're like, yeah, that's really good. Well, is really good enough? For, a long time, I had gotten by with really good, and I got gigs from really good. And like, yeah, he's a really good bass player. And I got tired of doing that. Moment was like, oh, you need to like, if you're a fish in a pond, that whole thing of like being a big fish in a small pond, if you jump into a bigger pond and you grow to the size of that pond, I felt like, well, now I'm in this pond of like with all of these other people potentially. And that's where I want to be anyway. And these are people that like, if I see them in public, we'd start talking and like we're on a colleague sort of friend basis. So if that's the case, more than a fear thing, it's like I want to respect, just the craft of it and not sell myself or people that listen to what I'm doing short, because they don't. They fucking take that shit super seriously, like all
as
those
Jesse
guys.
and I call it, we want a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Well, dude, that's a really great point to bring up, because I mean that becomes more the reality as you get older, especially if you want to be in that world of working as a working musician,
working professional.
Yeah, because at a certain point, well, really it's always the case, but your skill set and its development, the degree to which you develop that is proportional to the opportunities that are afforded to you, and your ability to be ready for those opportunities when they present themselves. It's that whole idea of preparation plus opportunity,
Yeah.
And you need to be prepared when an opportunity presents itself.
Yeah. I've had opportunities presented.
Plus luck equals opportunity.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or luck. I think it's luck is preparation, or luck is preparation and opportunity, or something like that. Or it's where those two things meet, or something like that. That's the saying, right?
Proper planning prevents poor performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
That's universal.
Basically what it gets
Yeah.
down to.
Yeah, I've had opportunities presented to me where I couldn't take them because
Yeah.
I would have eaten shit, and not even like you're in your own head. Like somebody offers me a thing, and I can't take it because I'm like, oh, if I do this, it'll be worse than if I just say no or that I can't do it. You know,
So
because
you'll hurt yourself by performing at that level.
You don't want to always say no to things, but you can say no to things and other things can potentially roll around if you're in those social circles more than if you take something and then you like totally shit the bed when you do it.
Shit the bed so
That's-
badly that you lose future calls
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
now you've
and-
exposed yourself.
That really encompasses a lot about the way that I think about things, because the way that I chose to like progress as a player and the things I chose to focus on and the things I still choose to dedicate my time to are very, very part and parcel to that I want to be the kind of player that never has to say no to a gig because I am not at the level or to at the level that I would need to be to perform on the gig.
Up
I
to
want to be
snuff.
able to say yes to any and every opportunity that comes
Yep.
my way. And
Same.
the thing is, the more you pursue that, the wider your breadth of opportunity becomes, because the wider your net gets cast. And that happens to me a lot now, where people from different circles of music, like genre-wise, have an impression of me as a player, and they think that that's what I do.
Yeah.
Like there are guys in town in LA that think I'm a jazz drummer, whereas to me, I couldn't think I'm anything farther than that. Although I've done enough work and I have enough experience doing that I can fake it. You know, I'm not the guy who's, you know, gonna be taking Marcus Gilmore's gig. That's not me. But I can
No,
work.
but yeah, but you
And
could.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say you could do a jazz gig though. Like whether or not you take somebody's gig, like if you had that on a resume of I can play jazz, that's absolutely like.
But as far as like pursuing that to a world class level, no, that's not the kind of guy I am. But I love jazz so much, and I play it and practice it so much that level still continues to rise throughout the years.
I've certainly
But
forced you to come in and play jazz drums on sessions.
that's true. That's true. And
Mentally, I like the idea of wanting to be that kind of guy, but in reality, I know that I just don't have that passion to be that guy. Like, I want to just be really good at the things that I love to do,
right.
and that's about it.
So anywhere where I was taking that is there. That's a double-edged sword too, because you run the risk of getting pigeonholed, and you get pigeonholed by multiple social circles. So there are people out there who think of me as being a jazz drummer, which to me that's almost laughable. And then there are guys who know me as being like a straight up pop drummer or a rock drummer. And then there's like a limited circle of people that I do more like Brazilian and Cuban type gigs with, and every time I do those gigs, I try to play within that idiom to the degree that that's exactly what should happen. To me, that's kind of indicative that maybe I'm doing something right, because these people who play this music don't hear me as being a rock drummer who's trying to play jazz or
No,
vice
that's
versa.
a great fucking compliment that you're settling into a style so naturally that it's not like, oh yeah, Matt's a great rock drummer, but you know, he can also play some jazz. But for these guys to go like, oh no, we need a jazz drummer, let's call Matt.
But I think for
That's a
me,
compliment,
the
for
place
sure.
that comes from is that the kind of guys that I always idolized growing up are those kind of players.
Bingo.
They're the chameleon type drummers, and
It's that validation
not
that-
necessarily. I mean, of course, so many of my influences have indistinguishable voices. But the guys that I really resonated with the most are the guys who happen to be in alignment with what I envisioned my career being. So the guys who could do seemingly every gig and sound pretty authentic at doing that gig. I mean, I
Yeah.
think for most drummers, the most obvious name who comes up for that and is basically undeniable is Vinnie Colaiuta, right? And to me,
I mean, dude's playing on a fucking Megadeth record. Like, if you
yeah, I
didn't-
mean, to
these
me,
are some of those types of people that if you didn't read the liner notes, you could be surprised at going like, "What the fuck? That was him?"
Right.
You know.
and to me that's something that I've always admired. And another person who would be like that is Josh Freese too.
Yeah.
Granted that Josh has a very recognizable voice on a lot of things, but there are also so many records that Josh has played on that you would never guess he was
You'd
the
have to
drummer
read the
on.
fucking liner notes.
Yeah. But I mean, you hear him play with 9 Inch Nails or with A Perfect Circle, and you're like, yeah, that's Josh Freese.
Element.
Right.
I feel like
And
But see,
then-
that screams out in your playing though, Matt. Like that chameleon aspect, and that's definitely your path. And I think that should be its own sense of validation. Because
Yeah.
when I hear my own self and I don't hear any of that, I hear my own sense of validation, and I want to be one of those guys that just like has my sound. Anything that I play on, any cover gigs that I'll do, you walk by in a fucking, you know, whatever. You're walking by and you hear the drummer and you go, "Oh, that's David." You don't even have to like walk over and check. That is what I want out of my playing, and that is what I'm like diving really into. And I love that
Well-
you're diving into that chameleon aspect.
It's really funny that you say that because my best friend, which you guys all know, Tony Alleman, heard me
Shout out.
playing in a club that we play at regularly, right? And did not know I was the drummer that night, and was just hanging out at the bar all night. And he was remarking to the people he was there with, he was like, "Man, this drummer sounds great." He's like, "Who is this?" And then he never came over to check. And then at the end of the night, he
That's
kind of
so
peeked
funny.
in for the last set, and he was like, "Oh, you motherfucker."
That's
And I thought
awesome.
that was so funny because Tony and I have been playing together for 16 years at this point.
Right.
And I was playing, you know, a lot of 60s and 70s rock stuff that we typically don't play together. And so there's an idiom I was drawing from there that he wasn't familiar with
Yeah.
because we just don't play that stuff together. And so he couldn't recognize that it was me playing literally on the other side of a wall.
I think that's fucking
And
dope.
that kind of took me aback when that happened.
it's
Because there's not a situation where me and Jesse could be playing and he could walk by and not know that it was me. And same with like his bass playing. He could do one little fucking like bass slide and I know it's him. It just is what it is.
I guess that brings it back to like the type of, I guess that can bring it back to like the type of musician you are as like a practicer and how you view music in general. Because there are kind of like, as a playing musician, there are kind of like the two paths you can take, and that's like being a live musician, playing on stage in front of other people, or being a session musician.
Right.
And I feel like those session musicians are the chameleons,
100%.
because they have to sound like whatever the gig requires.
Yeah, really, really solid drums, just laying it down. I don't need some crazy flair out of it. I just need
Yeah.
super polished drums. I'm calling that guy.
Yeah.
They're not fucking
Dude.
calling me.
And it definitely brings it back to
100%.
like
Me.
like Davey, what you were saying and how you practice for yourself, and yeah, I'm talking to you.
Okay.
And how like your validation is basically, you know, for yourself, and I can hear that in playing because I play with you frequently, and
Yeah.
I've even had you come in for some sessions, and you know, not to say that you can't play other styles, you play them well, but
Yeah.
you are definitely yourself. Like I definitely know it's you playing. I play with Matt.
That only gets like worse over time. I feel like maybe worse isn't the word, but I definitely appreciate that.
I think it
I
think
can
it definitely
imagine
comes out more the more bored you get. And I can definitely relate to that.
Damn, son.
And I think
He knows me. Max knows me.
and I think Matt can confirm that too. Actually,
Dude,
you all can confirm that
definitely.
because I've played on stage with you when I've been super
Yeah.
bored and I stopped caring about what I sound like.
This is true.
But sometimes it's the most fun.
Oh, it's definitely
Play
the
with
most
you.
fun, but
You,
Does
yeah,
it
but
serve
you
the
never,
job all the time? No, but
yeah, but you never steer the Titanic into the iceberg, though. It's like you're still doing your job, but you're doing your, you know, in any of those moments, it's
Yeah.
been funny because
well, I still want to
You-
get paid at the end of the night. So
right, right.
course.
It,
you
it
still want to
doesn't
get
go,
called back.
yeah, it doesn't go so out there that it just gets crazy, but because nobody will notice it necessarily in the audience, you know, because you're still holding down your part. But like, I'll look over at you and you're doing some sort of, you know, crazy elaborate solo, or you're throwing in some, I don't know, either chord substitutions or just, I don't know, throwing on some extensions to those chords, or doing just something bananas over there that I will look at and I'll go, I don't even know exactly what it is necessarily. I just hear it and I go, oh, like, all right, we're getting fancy tonight.
well, yeah. I mean, that like one of my favorite things to do was when we were the three of us, you, me, and David were in a band together.
Yeah.
Would be to do something weird and then look at David to see if, to see if he caught it.
Yeah.
And if he did, he would give me a look, and then, like we would nod.
Yeah.
And then toss something right back.
Yep.
Well, and that was the best part for me because I always liked holding down exactly what I was doing, just because like I felt like it kept what you guys were throwing in there more incognito, because if I held down like the root of everything, then Max could throw in something crazy, and then like, you know,
Nothing's
David could throw-
destabilized.
yeah, David could throw in something crazy, and then I'm like, did anybody else notice that? No, and I feel like I'm getting away with something. Like I'm driving the getaway car to you guys fucking your
Robbing the bank.
obnoxiousness. Yeah, exactly.
I love robbing the bank, dude. Fuck them.
Yeah,
But you know, it's really funny because like I play with Matt all the time, and because of the drummer that he is and the way that he is, he's always what's the word, like not
I
safe,
think it's more
but
of a
like
phrase. Right the fuck
like
on
solid and when he does something that's not Matt like,
yeah. It's earth shattering.
he'll like take a chance whether it lands or not. There's always this moment that I look over and I'm like, what the fuck did you just do?
Yeah,
Fucking something.
Well, you know, that's something that I try to keep together, because I mean, as all of us know, there's a famous catchphrase that John used to always tell us, and
Oh, yeah,
that
the
is
tank,
keep some
baby.
in the tank. Right? So that can have multiple meanings. That you know, you could take that to say never play at 100% of your capabilities, because at that point you're essentially stretching yourself too far, and your performance is going to degrade at that
Yeah.
point. But it could also mean
CPU.
have that stuff together that nobody expects you to have, And when you are playing with people who you know can appreciate that and you can have a good time with, be able to flip that switch on and off when it's appropriate. You know, and for me, a lot of the guys that I really like are really, really good at that.
Yeah.
And most of the guys that I like aren't. Like it's not like we're just constantly just sitting around with this fucking tank just unloading all the time, but like I don't have that same kind of reservation of just like, yeah, I could just play fucking like 3 hours straight and just not do anything fancy, and then like the last song of the night just bust something out. Like if you give me a chance to bust something out, I'm gonna bust something out. Just selective.
Dude, one of my favorite things about being in that class with John was that, you know, he grew up knowing Josh Freese, and he grew up knowing, you know, the Picaro family and the Wackerman family. So he used to tell me stories about, you know, Josh when he was younger and how, you know, he was understudying with Vinny for years. And I thought that was so fascinating because they're very different players, and yet you can really hear a lot of that stuff. And also Brooks, dude, like John used to tell me stories about what an unbelievable monster Brooks was. And, you know, at the time he was playing with
Bad Religion.
Well, I mean, I could definitely see that from, you know, the stuff he did with Suicidal Tendencies when he was essentially like 15 or 16 years old. But for John to be telling me stories about like all these chops and facility that Josh had that he basically never pulled out from playing to Zappa music for, you know, his entire childhood. And I just remember having so much respect for that somebody could have all of that stuff together, and yet it's there, and it only comes out when it's appropriate. And it just goes to show that there aren't a whole lot of times where it is super appropriate, especially when you're in like a higher level gig, you know, where there's pressure, there's cameras everywhere. Not really the right thing to do. But when you're in a band playing in a bar or a club somewhere and there's not a whole lot of people there and you just want to have a good time with your friends, dude, it's so much fun to pull that stuff out. And
now
I remember when that became important to me, when I knew that I had to get that stuff together, was, and I guess I could say that this is you know, another kind of a landmark kind of thing for me, was I had this goal as a young musician that one of the things I wanted to do as a working musician was I wanted to play on a piece of music that was placed on TV. And I had this idea that was something that was going to happen much later in my career. And then things just happened to play out that John was also involved. And the first recording session that I ever did, the music that I did on that recording session got placed on a television show a couple months later. And so that kind of threw everything about the way that I thought about that stuff out the window. Because something I was expecting to not do until my 30s or 40s all of a sudden happened way sooner than I expected. And on that session, we had the luxury of doing it ourselves. We weren't in like a huge studio like, you know, Capitol or East West or something like that, and there was no pressure. So John, just being who he was, just kept having me track the same tunes over and over. And every single time he'd say, yeah, cool, do something else. Not, that was good, like that was a great take, cool, we'll use that. It's, yeah, do something else. And we tracked 30 songs that day for my first recording session. And that was one of the scariest situations I've ever been in my life.
Yeah.
And I remember how unbelievably deflated I felt at the end of that day, because I had just been stretched so incredibly thin creatively and had just come up against my limits as a player in a way that I'd just never done before.
It-
And it
What year
ended
was
up
that?
being one of the most gratifying experiences of my life. But in the moment, I was horrified at what was
Yeah.
happening.
It's funny you bring that up because it reminds me of we had Luis Flores on our last podcast, and I got to do a session with Linda through him, and it was kind of like the same thing. It was like one of the most nerve-wracking experiences I've had, and knowing the stories about Linda just made it even like more nerve-wracking. And I think it's just what great producers do is they just have you do a whole bunch of takes and just like, do this, try it this way. So you're not just doing the same thing over and over again, which is what she did. And it was like, at no point did she ever say like, that was good. Like that was a good one. Like, let's use that one or anything. And the validation came afterwards when Lewis told me basically that like, yeah, if she didn't like it, she would have told you to leave.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay. And then the next time I saw her, she remembered me and like, said hi and was all nice to me and all that. So,
Dude,
That's cool.
I think everybody can identify with that because like one of the scariest things in terms of, feeling validated about other people that you're playing with is whether they say something to you or not. And oftentimes when somebody doesn't say anything to you, that's actually the validation right there. And I remember on that, well, I guess it wasn't my first tour. It was a couple in with Leroy Miller that I had this very, very bad habit because I was very self-conscious about my playing at that time and still am, where after every show, I would either ask him how it was and what I could do better, which is fine, but then I would apologize for things that I had perceived messing up myself. And very often, those were things that he either did not hear or didn't care about. And then what happened is I was just bringing those things to his awareness.
right.
And another one of my best friends, Vitor Mello, who I had on that gig with me, pulled me aside at one point and told me, dude, shut the fuck up. He was like, if they're not saying anything about it, don't volunteer that information yourself.
No.
Because he said, where you're coming from, I understand. You want to do a good job and you want to perform for the artist. But he said, but if they're not complaining, shut your mouth.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of value to that.
So
Yeah.
I think we're gonna have to wind down here.
How long have we been going?
Dope.
Been going for 2 hours.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah, I guess so.
man, fuck you guys.
Fuck you too, Hansel. All right. There.
Hey, it's hard
No,
to
man.
it's hard to do a segue to a cutoff point when we're talking
Well-
about stuff like this. So
Can we do like one last little thing and keep it short between all of us?
Yes.
Uncircumcised.
I think it would be cool if every one of us could offer like one or two points of advice when it comes to practicing, just like little bite-sized tidbits.
Well, I would add to that on another level. I was going to ask everybody what they were going to, if they were, like, what are you going to do differently next year? And not that, like, I think that because it's 2021, your whole life and mindset miraculously changes. But, like, it's with the unique situation we're in, it's going to be, going from essentially nothing and, like, hardly any gigs or no gigs to ramping up again. And, like, eventually, hopefully by, like, summer, the fall, whatever it is, we can get back to pretty much where we were at before. So since that's the case, like, not just with advice on practicing. I would kind of want to hear like what's everybody's sort of plan moving into this next year.
Slow down. I'm actually going to slow down in not only my practicing, because that's something I've neglected for a long time, just that crucial part of practicing, which is just to slow down until it's right instead of just going for it. But that also can just equate in my mental thinking about a lot of things and just how I operate in life to just, I mean, I'm already a very patient person, but you can always be more patient. That's more of what I'm going to be working on. Actually not getting frustrated with, how fucking agonizingly boring playing very slowly is.
Right.
But to learn to shift my mindset about that type of practice the way that I have about regular practicing, which is to go from, oh my God, this fucking sucks, this is boring, I hate this, to, oh, hell yeah, I can't wait to fucking play some fucking 40 BPM shit, some fucking 33. Like, I need to shift my mindset into that.
David, just out of curiosity, are you going through this because of that stuff that I showed you before?
1 second.
As he fixes Pro Tools for the fourth time.
Really? Whoa.
Bingo.
Bingo, bango.
Have you not noticed me doing that?
No, I hadn't noticed.
I did. I didn't want to say that.
I just assumed you were being obnoxious like you usually are. So.
No, I was helping Max because that's going to be like 4 different clips of audio he's going to have to line up there. But fortunately for all the other ones, it was in between times where I wasn't talking. That one I think caught me talking. But anyway, does it have anything to do with fucking old boy drummer man that we were watching? A lot of it,
or just the conversations that we had when you were over here. Like, God, I guess it was like 2 months ago now.
I think it was a little bit longer than that.
Might have been.
Yeah. I think it was sometime in August, September. It doesn't fucking matter. Anyway, yeah, it's a lot of that's really starting to like come to light as I'm working through some stuff, and that I'm watching a lot of my favorite guys. I mean, yes, it's a lot of repetition, but there is still also that like there's a reason it's that clean. It's because if you ask that dude to play that groove at 50 BPM, it would still feel magnificent. And I need to start incorporating a lot of that really good feel at a slower BPM. And it's gonna be a fucking pain in the ass, but again, it's gonna be that mental shift from this sucks, I hate this, to this is just hell yeah. The way that I approach the rest of my practice. Like that's my mindset about practicing is, holy shit, hell yeah, I get to play some fucking drums right now. And I think for me, that's a beautiful place to be. A lot of people don't have that same, luxury to think about practice like that.
I would agree.
All right. Matt, since the green rectangle of consciousness is on you right now, what are you going to be doing moving into next year?
I mean, I would kind of just piggyback off of what David said. Like the thing that has really been transformative for me, actually 2 things this year, is one, playing incredibly slow. And I mean, maybe we'll have to bleep this out after the cut, but like for me, staying up till 6 o'clock every morning.
6 o'clock. Clap sync.
Basically, like one of the best things that I've done through this whole thing was getting a little lit late at night and basically playing snare drum etudes at like 20 beats per minute for like 3 to 5 hours. And I just kind of hit this stride where I was just moving through all this material at these incredibly slow tempos and just finding this sense of zen that I've heard so many of the players I've studied with and admired talk about. And it's really the kind of thing that you can't fully grasp, like the power and just the gravitas of that until you've experienced that almost like sense of nirvana that comes from playing at tempos that slow and trying to keep your touch together and your phrasing, your sense of space, and have it sound completely natural, as if you were to play it at the most comfortable tempo and dynamic you could possibly imagine. So there's that. And also the value of playing with loops. And so for me, the thing that I've been working on to, just ad nauseum is I got a loop from a drummer that I really admire, Matt Garska from Animals as Leaders. And it's just a loop he had created from a permutation sequence he had written out. So he had some, basic rhythms that, he had permutated completely. And he basically just arranged them such that they sounded as musical as possible. It just sounds like this gigantic, huge phrase that flows so beautifully. And the entire idea is it's just a super basic loop, and you have to figure out as many ways as possible to interpret those rhythms. And so I've literally worked on almost nothing else this entire pandemic than that. Just coming up with different ways of interpreting these rhythms. And I have a gigantic list of stuff, of ways that I've come up with interpreting this thing. And it's improved basically every aspect of my playing. Because
Does it
now
keep you
I
inspired?
just... Yeah, super inspired. Because now all I have to think about is, what's something I'm not digging about my playing right now? I can probably use this thing to work on it. And honestly, I've probably made more progress in the last 10 months than I've made in the last 5 years. And for me, I feel like that's saying a lot, being a serial practicer as I am. It was kind of an epiphany.
It's about what you practice, not how long.
Yeah, definitely.
Jesse?
Yeah.
Little bitch.
Yep, absolutely. Just
Slender
Jesse,
Yeah.
little bitch Davidson.
what, that you didn't see that pop up at the bottom of the screen or whatever, the Zoom thing? No, I would just sum up mine is that there's technical stuff as far as like the main thing I've been working on is timing, and I would say that that's going to be my main thing is like sitting down with a metronome and really like getting that ingrained in me of like being able to feel out all those accents. And also I've been flipping a metronome to where I'm basically normally you would feel it on it's
good.
yeah,
Yeah,
so you take a metronome and you count out, if you're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, you then flip it to where you start counting on the ands or like the upbeats. And so you start to hear the metronome as it landing on the upbeats instead of on each quarter note. And so basically it's sort of a way where you can like fuck with time. That's like the easiest way I can explain that. So I've been working on that, and like there's other technical things that I'm working on besides that. But the larger picture of me is going to be, I realize that everything in my life is connected. So that's like physical fitness, that's like mental health, like physical health, playing, all that kind of stuff. My different creative endeavors, writing, everything is all sort of tied together into one thing. And so if all of them aren't in balance and I feel like I'm doing decently in all of them or like fulfilling all these things, then my playing suffers, because while I'm playing, I'm thinking about all these other things that I have to do. If I'm not working out and I start practicing, I go, oh, you didn't do this today. You didn't do your push-ups today. You didn't go running today. So really it's going to be letting go of a lot of bullshit, especially like all these ideas about what I think practicing is and getting better is, and like, well, this person's a great musician and this is what they did, and I'm not even like doing anything remotely close to that. It's like, well, as long as you're working on it and you have a process and you're getting better, that's all that matters. So it's really letting go of a lot of things and getting everything in balance, and then my playing will get better. So that's the simplest answer I can give. Davey, what about you?
I'm not sure which question I'm going to answer, so bear with me. I guess what I would say is that as far as like things to practice is that the key is definitely inspiration. I don't see myself as a bassist. Jesse knows that. I think Max understands. I don't see myself as an instrumentalist of any type, but I keep taking up new ones. And I think the most important thing is that's what compels, like I feel compelled to, and that's why I do it. So you should always be chasing your muse, whether it has you like you want to be, inside of one instrument, just, mastery of that is your thing, or if you're just like, they all seem to blend together. That's what I'm experiencing. I think that you have to sight read. I sight read on guitar every day. I sight read on bass every day. I sight read horn every day. And my goal is to get piano and banjo and mandolin back into the fold of playing every day. I get really distracted. I'm really enjoying the shit out of the alto sax. And thank you very much to Maxwell for letting me borrow that a couple months ago. This year I started 3 different instruments, and it was mostly just like, we all needed the distraction, and it's done. I feel like Matt right now, I feel like this has been a big year, like a sea change in my musicality. The visceral effect of playing the horn and learning it without a teacher and putting in enough time to where I got understandings that I needed like you would from a lesson. That's been huge. The feeling of it compared to the feeling of the instruments I normally play, I now realize that there's just not enough texture here almost at certain times, and that's okay, but it means that I'm it's just part of my search for the thing I can't identify. So that's where I'm at, and definitely next year is all about putting it all out there. So many things. I got a novella sitting on it 6 years now, definitely needs to be put out. Wrote an album to go with it. We're gonna trash that, but yeah, so it's about getting everything that I've been putting together out there next year.
Fuck yeah.
Commit to it. Fucking commit.
Yes, sir.
Fuck yeah.
Nice.
Max?
I guess that means it's my turn.
Yes.
All right, good night, you guys.
Pass.
It's funny because I think I'm the opposite of everyone in that this pandemic, I have played less music than I did last year.
Yeah, you did.
Just personal. I mean, obviously, like gigging out less, but just like practicing and playing on my own. Like, I've barely done any.
Right.
What I have done a lot more of is mixing and writing. So that's something that another aspect of my chops that I've been working on. Whether it's mixing for albums. Had a buddy, Lindsey IG, who just released his album that I had been working on for a long time. And writing the bumper tracks for this podcast has been super fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So like I guess that I don't know where I'm going with that, but I don't know. Next year,
You've been inspired in different ways.
Yeah, next year I'm gonna be all about workflow. I think. My workflow's not bad, but I'm learning a whole lot of new stuff lately, especially with all this VR stuff. And mixing in VR is a whole nother thing. So as that gets off the ground, I'm going to be learning more about that. And I'll need a better workflow to be faster at that. Getting faster at mixing. And it spills into like keyboard as well. Like reworking all my charts, getting a better workflow on how I write charts for projects. How I organize patches and get patches ready, and how I prepare and things like that. So I think I'll be focusing a lot on that aspect. Yeah.
Right on. Well, cool. As usual, 2 hours has flown by in the blink of an eye, and if we weren't concerned about recording time and, people watching this and all that, this could easily go for another 2 or 3 hours. So as it typically...
Oh, you know what? I forgot. I brought something for the people watching. Oh, motherfuckers! Hey, welcome to the podcast. All right.
I cut the brakes. What? Wild card pitches.
Wild card.
And there went all 3 of our viewers.
There they went.
Yeah, I really like the podcast up until that Davey guy flipped me off. No more. No.
I was really
Sonic
invested,
City
and then the
Who.
bearded guy put his finger up, and I said, "No more of this."
No more of this.
Yeah.
So
I was quite offended by that.
So I know we were still in a pandemic the last time we did a roundtable.
Yep.
But does anybody have anything they want to share with the world, promote?
Yeah.
Talk about.
Give somebody a fucking compliment or something like that.
I want to
spread some
promote the
fucking
idea
good
of taking mushrooms for depression.
shit. Oh, there you go.
All right.
He's just putting it out.
Hey, I can get behind that.
It's gonna help somebody. Shit.
You don't want me.
Oh, anything to
I mean,
promote?
I don't do mushrooms, but regardless of if I did or not, I would still enjoy one of these, which is a
What the frick
Himalayan
is
salt.
that? You took mushrooms and
Is that a salt
a-
lamp?
What was that?
It's a
Yeah,
Himalayan salt lamp.
I just got one of these, and
Is that a
I
salt
really
lamp?
like it.
Yeah, they're dope.
Is that a salt
So-
lamp or?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a salt lamp. So
It's
You
best
can't
in
keep
a
the
dark
salt lamp
room with
next to
the
the lava lamp. You know that, right?
yeah, dude. I mean, I love like between this and this, like when I'm writing and I just have like these on in a room and I'm writing next to the salt lamp, I feel like it's awesome. Like
Jesse,
I feel like
light
it's,
on 10% with all other lights off. That is like,
oh
that's-
yeah. So I have no financial interest in salt lamps, but that's my plug for the evening is get yourself a salt lamp. That shit's cool.
All right.
And they taste good.
Well, I'll finish it
really
up.
tasty.
I'll finish it up with plugging something real.
Weird, but okay.
Our Christmas spectacular is up on Oculus TV.
Hey,
That you can get. You can view it on any Oculus headset. It's also up on YouTube. It's 360. You can view it in a headset, cardboard, VR thing. You can even just use your phone and do the gyroscope 360 if you want to do it that way, or use your finger.
Brad.
It is on. If you
I
search,
have a question.
if you search Seed TV, CEED TV as one word on YouTube, you will find the channel, and all the videos are uploaded on there.
I have a question.
And I'm playing drums on some of those tracks.
Yes.
So that's cool too.
What is your question, sir?
You in the back.
You in the back.
The Oculus thing is super cool, but
Right? Dude.
That's
is
all right.
mayonnaise an instrument?
Oh,
I mean-
no, David.
You're dropping a
Mayonnaise.
whole lot of Oculus and VR. I'm just asking simple questions here at this point.
Well, if
It's
you
all
watch
about the
Dave,
attack that you know
mean-
with which you play the mayonnaise, obviously.
I mean,
Yeah.
Mayonnaise, I bet mayonnaise, if you mic'd it up right, it might sound dope.
I don't mean to be crass, but I just imagine like if you take like one of the big jars and you put your hand in and then mic that, it's gonna be like almost like a jug kind of effect. And you just go
The problem is,
It's
though,
like
is that
talking drum
mayonnaise
kind of
isn't
thing.
quite as immersive as.
Wait, what?
Hey, you know, I love some immersive mayonnaise. Just
I just love getting in
I
it.
mean, I immersed myself in it.
Yeah, good shit, y'all.
Yes,
Shall,
and also
we'll
yes.
reconvene at another time.
yeah.
All
like
right,
this.
fine.
We'll have to do a practice part 2, seeing as how we didn't actually get a whole lot of tips on practice.
It's this is practice / validation. That's what this episode
Well,
is.
yeah, I think that's equally valuable because I think it's
all
important
connected.
I think it's actually important for people to hear about stuff like that, and hopefully, you know, it doesn't come across as everybody, you know, kind of drinking each other's Kool-Aid, but it. I know for me, I love hearing stories about my heroes and you know their you know the watershed moments of their life, because sometimes it gives you a little bit of perspective about where you're at.
Yeah, I just love hearing about what different people do, which is the whole point of doing this podcast. I want to hear what makes everybody tick.
I love rock and roll. Put another dime in the jukebox, baby.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right, virtual gavel, go. And goodbye.
Sonic City Council was created by Jesse Davidson and Davey Sipes and engineered by Max Taylor at Desert Sound Studio in Palmdale, California. Thank you to Disaster Cabinet for the outro music. Intro music written by Max Taylor. Sonic City Council is produced in association with Amps Music Academy and the Showcase Venue. For more information, visit theshowcasevenue.com.